Chorja, Curm Fáilte Rove, agus Curm Inúldíh go bhfuil míid is sesiún poibli. I want to inform you that we are now in public session and you're welcome. Before we begin the meeting, I want to give a note on privilege. Witnesses giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts here are protected by absolute privilege in respect to the evidence they give to committee. This means that a witness has a full defence in any defamation action for anything said at a committee meeting. However, witnesses are expected not to abuse this privilege and may be directed to cease giving evidence on an issue at my direction. Witnesses should follow the direction of the Chair in this regard and are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that, as is reasonable, no adverse commentary should be made as against an identifiable third person or entity. Privilege against defamation does not apply to the publication by you outside of the proceedings held by the committee of any matters arising from those proceedings. And members, I'd like to advise and remind you of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, a member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting, and I would ask that any member who is participating via Microsoft Teams that prior to making their contributions that you would verbally confirm to me that you are on the ground to the Leinster House campus. And members are once again reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks, and it's imperative that you comply with any such direction that I make. The agenda for today's meeting is sea fisheries protection issues, including the accountability framework and decision-making procedures for enforcement activities. As members will know, and indeed those following this meeting, this is part of a broader piece of work that this committee is underway, and we have Deputy Padraig McLaughlin as rapporteur on compiling a report on sea fisheries protection issues and as they impact in Ireland. We're joined today by representatives of the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority. We have Mr. Pascal Hayes, Executive Chairperson, Mr. Michael Finn, Authority Member and Senior Executive Manager for Operations, Ms. Louise Murphy, Authority Member and Senior Executive Manager for Corporate Services, Mr. Barry Murphy, Executive Manager Legal Services, and Ms. Adrienne Patterson, Executive Manager Operations. And the opening statement has been forwarded to members, so I'll allow you 5 minutes to read the opening statement, and then we'll move to a questions and answer session. So, Mr. Hayes, if you'd like to lead us off on that, and just to note that there are clocks around the room, so just keep an eye on those if you don't mind.
Look, I have an abbreviated version of the opening statement which I intend to read. Should be done within 5 minutes.
Members should have copies circulated.
If it's a verbal one, it's understandable, but if there's one available, then I think we should have it.
You can provide that, Deputy, no problem.
Yeah. So we'll wait until we get it.
Okay, good morning, Chairman and committee members. I'd like to thank the committee for your invite to appear today. We welcome the continued interest in the role of the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority and issues impacting our work, including the accountability framework of the SFPA and SFPA decision-making procedures for its enforcement activities. The Sea Fisheries Protection Authority is an independent public body established under the 2006 Act, operating under the aegis of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. It is responsible for sea fisheries protection and seafood safety in Ireland, overseeing seafood production, fishing vessels and compliance with EU and national regulations. The SFPA is governed by a small executive authority of up to 3 members, including an executive chairperson, and follows the Code of Practice for the Governance of State Bodies 2016. It is accountable to the Public Accounts Committee and the Joint Committee on Fisheries and Maritime Affairs. The Oversight and Performance Delivery Agreement 2025 to 2026 formalises corporate governance arrangements between the SFPA and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine for oversight and reporting on performance. On an annual basis, the SFPA undertakes a self-assessment and produces annual reports and financial statements. We develop and implement a strategy on a 3-year cycle, with the current strategy operating from 2024 to 2026. The SFPA is supported by structures such as an Audit and Risk Committee and a ministerial appointed Sea Fisheries Protection Consultative Committee. Our core role is regulation and enforcement, monitoring fishing activity, production of safe seafood, and ensuring compliance with EU and national legislation, taking legal action where necessary, including referring cases to the Director of Public Prosecutions. We also apply our regulatory mandated EU points system for serious infringements. Our work is guided by a risk-based approach targeting higher risk operators for increased monitoring and inspections. In seafood safety, we work under a service contract with the Food Safety Authority of Ireland to inspect and approve production facilities and vessels, ensuring product safety and withdrawing unsafe foods when needed. We undertake official certification of seafood products for export where required, thus underpinning 5,300 jobs in the sector. Additionally, we have a service level agreement with the Department of Defence, which provides for aerial surveillance by the Air Corps, sea inspections by the Naval Service, and monitoring of activity at sea by the Fisheries Monitoring Centre, which is operated by the Naval Service. A major operational issue is the decline in at-sea inspections, which are conducted by the Naval Service. Inspections at sea by Naval Service had a five-fold decrease from 2021 to 2025, where there was a reduction from 1,131 to 204, and fisheries patrol days also decreased significantly. To address this, the SFPA has increased its use of the European Fisheries Control Agency vessels. The sector faces challenges such as quota cuts, rising costs, reduced naval service inspections, and adapting to new EU regulations. Despite this, the SFPA remains a key body for sustainability, compliance and food safety in Ireland through improvements especially in at-sea enforcement and a wider range of enforcement tools are needed. In conclusion, Chairman, I thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee today, and my colleagues and I are happy to provide additional information or answer any questions you may have.
Ramila Margaret. We'll move to questions and answers now, and members will have 7 minutes in which to put their questions and to get answers. So there'll be 7 minutes on the clock, and I have Deputy Whitmore, Deputy Maxwell and Senator Boyle in the first tranche, and then just members indicate as they wish to come in.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, because obviously we had a committee before Easter that was discussing the role and the operation of your organisation. One of the things that is repeatedly said to us is that essentially everything, any infringement becomes a criminal infringement. Can you just explain that for me? Like, can you provide some comments on it? Is that how you would see it? Because I understand you have a penalty system as well, which I would imagine if there's a penalty system that it's not necessarily a criminal case. Is that right? Can you go through that for me and just provide a response to that accusation, I suppose, that everything becomes a criminal issue?
Thanks, Deputy. I'll ask Mr. Murphy, our Head of Legal, to take you through both of those systems.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy, for the question. So I suppose there are 3 streams for dealing with infringements of the Common Fisheries Policy rules under the relevant control framework. So Member States have a discretion whether or not to apply administrative or criminal sanctions for infringements of the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy. So here in Ireland, the 2006 Act provides that a non-compliance with the regulation giving effect to the Common Fisheries Policy is an offence. So that operates under the criminal justice system. Okay. So there's no administrative sanction available under the 2006 Act. Member States on the third limb are, however, required across all Member States to have a point system for serious infringements of the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy. So there were 13 categories prior to the 10th of January 2026 for which points would be applied. All Member States are required to apply points that number of serious infringements has now increased at approximately 32 serious infringements, which are now liable for points for both masters for their registration and also for licence holders to apply to their licence. Under the Irish regulations, the statutory instrument 318 of 2020 explicitly states that the points apply irrespective of the criminal justice system proceedings. So that's set out in the regulations. So we have no discretion there in terms of applying the point system and the criminal system.
So it is true that every infringement comes under the 2006, and Ireland has chosen to have every infringement as a criminal infringement.
Well, that's the setup of the legislation. Yeah, and
okay.
I should clarify as well, under our remit, under our statutory functions, we also have food safety law enforcement. But I think you're asking specifically about the common fisheries policy, fisheries, exactly. Yeah.
And so can you give me an example of an infringement under the 2006, like what you could consider minor infringement that would also be considered a criminal?
Well, I suppose all infringements are potentially liable for action through the criminal justice system. There's no other option.
Okay.
And under the 2006 Act, but in addition, if it's in the serious category, there's a points process. But for infringements outside of the category of a serious infringement, the only option under the 06 Act is to submit a file to the DPP. There's a small number of offences under the Act, such as obstruction, which the SFPA can take on its own right, but the vast majority of them can only be taken by the DPP. Okay. That's set out in the legislation that the DPP is the prosecutor for those offences. Okay.
So, and then compared to other countries, because you said that it was up to each member state to decide the level of, whether it's administrative. Yeah. What do other countries do?
I wouldn't have definitive data on that. I know some member states do apply, fines, administrative fines, but I wouldn't have the precise data or detail on other member states. Yeah.
But essentially, that is legislation that the government in 2006 brought in, and you're applying it. Is
correct? Yeah.
Okay. In your opening statement, you said that high risk. I think that was the wording. High risk vessels you tend to focus on. Can you tell me how you determine what's high risk and what's not?
Sure, Deputy. I'll ask Ms. Patterson to take you through the risk analysis and how those risk ratings are arrived at.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy. So we have a multi-tiered approach to risk. So as I say, in relation to approved establishments on a food safety perspective, we also risk assess these. So this looks at the product that's being produced, the throughput, and the number of staff, and any previous compliance history. We then, for fisheries, have a number of different risk assessments that we undertake. The first one would be in relation to fisheries, which is at a very high level. So we look at the state of the stock, the quotas that are available, and any compliance issues around the regulations that are in place. We then look at the different fleet segments, because this gives an overall picture as to perhaps the different risks that are associated with vessels that are fishing in the same area with the same gear type. So as I say, we can benchmark them against each other. And then within Ireland, we have a two-tier vessel risk assessment. So we have a risk assessment or risk rating that's undertaken on an annual basis, which is based on data analysis that we have from the previous year and looking at previous history as well. And then we have a more dynamic risk assessment, which looks at the immediate threats of that vessel within sort of the last 2 months. So if there's been any changes or anything like that, and that's done across the board for all vessels fishing within the Irish EEZ. So as I say, it's wider than just the Irish vessel. So it allows us to target vessels, for want of a better word, but also then to get our resources to where we need them, and to use maximise the use of our limited resources that we have, both for land-based inspections and also sea-based inspections.
Okay, thank you. And I've very little time left, but I did, at the last meeting I asked, and you did send a letter to the Minister asking if he would consider or examine the use of observers aboard non-Irish boats. Did you receive anything back? I know you did send the letter to the to the Minister. Did you receive anything back from the Minister in relation to that?
Thanks, Deputy. Yes, indeed. I sent the letter, and as you say, you have a copy of it. I did get an acknowledgement from the Minister's private secretary, but nothing further since then.
Okay, so no commitment to look at it, because it is possible under the regulations for Ireland to put observers on other non-Irish boats. But we have to request it from the Council, is that correct?
Yeah, my understanding, Deputy, is that it's not possible for Ireland to put observers on other Member States' vessels. The other Member States would have to put observers on their own vessels, is my understanding.
Okay, but Ireland can request that happen, and
or any Member State can request it. It's in the regulation, but it has to go through the Council of Ministers.
Okay, but you didn't receive any formal response relating to that principle?
No, Deputy.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Maxwell, 7 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, folks. Page 4, the 11 years of DPP has offered direction 415 cases. Why is there no 26 information up there?
Thanks, Deputy. I'll again defer to my Head of Legal Services here.
I suppose our reporting for the first quarter for 2026 has just concluded, so it wasn't included in the information provided. But we can follow up. We can provide that.
Well, there's been 2 cases, because I found it in 2 minutes this morning. But I go back to 2025. A number of cases dealt with under the Probation Act or the Charitable Donations, 1. Okay. Well, I went onto the internet this morning, and in 2 minutes I found on the 19th of November 25, Dublin District Court, there was a fine. 17th of October 25 at Banton Court, there was a bond paid. March 25th, Drogheda Court, there was a fine paid. So there should be 2 fines there, and there's only 1. Now, I don't know, where does the bond come into that?
So just to explain, in relation to, so a fine wouldn't come under the Probation Act or a charitable donation.
So where is it in this here information?
Okay, so the reporting systems that we have report from the year of the infringement. So, for example, if a case was arising from an alleged offence in 2024, but it concluded in 2025, it comes under the 2024.
So it doesn't come under when the court case is dealt with?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. So then, October the 25th last year in Letterkenny District Court, I'll not name anyone, we had that case, the accuracy of the instruments. It was brought up here by Deputy McLaughlin, it couldn't be answered. That case was found not guilty. I don't see it found not guilty. We're told number of cases the DPP directed, number of cases dismissed in the courts, nil. So where's that case reported on in those figures?
So I suppose just in relation to as I say, the reporting, it's reported in the column or the row, sorry, of the year that the alleged
where
offence.
the case was dismissed, there's no row for dismissed cases. This man was took to court over 10 years, hounded, and the case was threw out. Where is it on that list?
So that there is a column there of the number of cases dismissed in the courts.
Number of cases dismissed, nil.
So again, you need to refer to the year of the alleged.
But sure, go back, what year? 24, nil, 23, nil, 22, nil, 2, 2020, where is it? You tell me. I'm looking at it. I found it on the internet in 2 minutes. Where is it?
So the 2020-15 row, that's where you'll find it. So you'll see number
so
of...
2020-15 row, number of cases dismissed in the court, 3. So that's one of them.
Correct.
Okay, right. So it took a few minutes to get to that point. Very good. So 26, 2 cases, right, we have there not reported. 25, there was 4 cases, 2 fines, but you're saying that one fine was done in 25 because he was caught, that person was caught in 25, and the other one was whatever year he was caught in.
Yes, it flows from the year of the alleged infringement, yes.
Okay, right. Because, you see, accountability is what we're here about today. And a lot, you see, from what I'm hearing from fishermen all around the country, they land into, is it Castletown, Bear, Dunmore East, Killybegs, and if there's one digit wrong by the captain, they're for the high jump and up to court and get a criminal conviction. But you come in and these figures are all mixed up, and you can't, like a 2-minute search on the internet told me there's already 2 cases in 2026. They're not here. The 25, like it says, number of cases dismissed in the courts, 3. Number of cases with convictions recorded, 5. Like, you know, it's gobbledygook in my eyes. That's what I think. You know, you read it and you're trying to search and you're trying to get information. It's all about accountability, and it's as clear as mud. What here?
Have you a question, Deputy?
Yeah, it's as clear as mud. You see, Mr. Hayes, this is your second time in. The last day, your attitude was, lads, we don't have to answer questions to use. We don't report to you. Questions were asked by all members, and it was just a complete blank. And no matter who you meet in the industry, if it was one group of people, yeah, but every group in the industry we meet, their number one complaint is the SFPA. There's other issues, but there's not one group that I have met that have said, oh, the SFPA are doing a great job for Irish fishing. Not one. Do you not see a problem here?
Well, Deputy, I guess I dispute that. Number one, we took that attitude the last time. And number two, I dispute that we didn't answer questions.
Sure.
The count, I'm told, was we answered over 100 questions at the last sitting.
That'll do, because it's a waste of time, yeah.
Thank you. Senator Boyle, 7 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming in today. I'll start off by just a few simple questions. Why is all the monitors not done in the factories?
I'll ask Ms. Patterson to take that one, please.
Thank you, Senator. Under Ireland's control plan, which is approved by the Commission, which allows for product to be transported prior to weighing, we are obliged to undertake monitoring of fish as it is landed. So 1 in 20 landings is monitored upon landing. The remaining 19 go to the factory for weighing after transport without monitoring.
But surely to God, it makes no sense, this monitoring when everything can be done in the factory. Because, I mean, my next question is the sampling. I mean, the sampling system, you know, when the boat lands and you take it out, it goes through the machine and you take the sample. And, I mean, the captain of the boat is just given it, like, you have to understand, he's out in sea, rough seas. He can only give a guesstimate of what his bycatch is. I mean, at the end of the day, when it goes up to the factory, everything's done through the proper systems, weighing, everything's there, cameras, the whole lot, and the bycatch can be sampled up there. Surely that's the right way this should be done. You know, a common sense approach.
As I say, we have to work with what's in the control plan, and the control plan states that 1 in 20 landings has to be weighed upon landing under the supervision of the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority. And for those 1 in 20 landings, sampling has to also be undertaken at landing.
I see here in your annual report of 2021, 69% of Irish vessels was inspected. Given that we had only 15% of the quota, do you not think that's a bit disproportionate, you know?
I think we have to look at the bigger picture here. And once we look at the statistics for what's actually fishing within the Irish EEZ, 92.6% of all activity in the Irish EEZ is by Irish fishing vessels. So therefore, the most inspections is undertaken on those vessels. You know, also when we look at the number of landings, the majority of landings are from vessels of the Irish flag. So therefore, the majority of inspections on a percentage-wise are on Irish vessels. But when we look at the wider statistics, at landing, 13.3% of vessels with an Irish flag are inspected, whereas From other member states, it's almost 24%, and from third countries, it's 23%. This is based on the number of landings by those particular flags versus the number of inspections.
And, well, can you tell me in the last 5 years, how many factory fishing vessels was inspected? From non-Irish, European ones, how many in the last 5 years has been inspected?
From third countries?
Yeah.
Or?
No, well, they're not alone third countries. Say Dutch and the factory fishing vessels that we all see out there, these big vessels, how many of them was inspected in the last 5 years?
Okay, so these vessels don't land into Ireland, so these have to be inspected at sea. Inspecting these vessels at sea is actually very challenging because of the nature of the inspections. First of all, you've got weather constraints, and this year has been incredibly challenging weather-wise. We haven't actually inspected any pelagic vessels fishing in the Irish EEZ this year. However, it is, as I say, important to recognise that the safety of our inspectors is paramount when we're undertaking fishing vessels inspections at sea. The inspectors have to get from the patrol vessel to the fishing vessel, be it a large pelagic factory vessel or a smaller demersal vessel. And that in itself has a number of dangers associated with it. So the conditions have to be optimal to do that. In relation to last year, the number of pelagic freezer vessels that were inspected, the number is 4.
Right, to me, it sounds astonishing why we can't have somebody on these vessels. I mean, even down in Africa and Mauritania, the government down there has inspectors on these vessels, and why we're up here and we can't have nobody on them and seeing what's going on. And then I just wanted a couple other questions too. Is these third countries in Norway are granted access into the Irish economic zone. Who carries out the risk assessment on these third countries? Is it yourselves, or is it Europe? When they're operating in Irish waters.
It's a joint approach by the European Fisheries Control Agency and the member states. So we look at, again, the same criteria that we look at for any other member states or for the Irish vessels when we're looking at the activities within European Union waters, which includes risk assessing UK vessels and, as you pointed out, Norwegian vessels.
So it's really what you're saying, that they're not being checked?
This year alone, there was 5 inspections of Norwegian vessels within the Irish EEZ. Yeah.
And so, there were one day there was 35 of them down there alone.
As I say, and as pointed out by the Executive Chair within the opening statement, we do have challenges in relation to at-sea inspections, particularly with the Naval Service. As you're aware, they have resource difficulties. They are the state seagoing wing. They are tasked with fisheries inspections. And as mentioned within the opening statement as well, there's been a 5-fold decrease in the number of inspections undertaken in the last 5 years by the Irish Naval Service. The SFPA does put inspectors on board the EFCA patrol vessel to undertake inspections. But again, if you've got a single patrol vessel operating within the entire EEZ, if the patrol vessel is in one area, that means that there's a large area that's not being covered.
No, I get where you're coming from, but one person on a patrol vessel, I mean, these factory ships, what I'm saying, that we should have people on there. I mean, if they have it in Africa and Mauritania, surely to God we should have it here.
Yeah. Sorry, Senator. And as mentioned, we have written to the Minister in relation to this, and we're awaiting a response. From 2028 onwards, there will be remote electronic monitoring of all vessels operating within EU waters, including those vessels of third country origin. So, as I say, we will have REM coming into play from January 28.
No, Chair, just one question.
It directly relates to that, I'll allow it.
No, it's just on kilowatt days. We know that some of these countries has what happens what is the penalties for these countries that go over their kilowatt days? We know that the Belgians have gone over it. What is the procedure there? Michael, I see you're
there was an issue there which was brought to our attention by the industry in relation to the kilowatt days for the Belgian industry, and at the time I wrote to the Commission, I brought it to their attention, I brought it also to the Belgian authorities, and they acknowledged that while in previous years they would have had a made arrangement with Ireland would say to swap kilowatt days. That didn't happen in 2025, so they had to make alternative arrangements, which they ultimately did. But if they hadn't done that, we'll say then it's a matter for the Commission, who monitor it on behalf of all the Member States. They could come along and put pressure on Belgium to not allow their vessels in there, or ultimately, if it was got to a certain extreme, they could actually close the fishery. So the Commission can take measures, but ultimately it's up to each Member State to monitor their vessels in the same way that we do. We monitor our vessels, and we know when they're getting close to exceeding their kilowatt days, and we have that arrangement. We tell the department, and at the Court of Management, we'll have the industry in, so they know and they're well aware, and they can take measures to make sure they can mitigate so that they don't go over their kilowatt days. But the Commission does have a role, as does each Member State, responsible for their own vessels, their own fleet.
Thanks, I'm out of time. Thanks, Chair, for your discretion.
Deputy McLaughlin. 7 minutes.
Gura Magat, Cahirla. First question is, did the SFPA avail of any media training before you came here today or in previous hearings?
Thanks, Deputy. Our training is managed by Ms Murphy, so I'll ask Ms Murphy to answer that.
Thanks, Deputy. So on an annual basis, we do undertake a training needs analysis, and in 2025 we did identify a need for communications training.
Did you get, sorry, I'll be very clear.
Yeah.
Did you, the SFPA, pay for media training to prepare for participation in Oireachtas committees, both today or in previous committees?
So in advance of today, yes, we had communications training in January. We did not undertake any training prior to the November, which is our prior committee hearing. It had been identified, as I've said, as part of our training needs analysis, which is conducted right across the organisation by each business unit. And it was to, I suppose, cover communications in general, yes, at Oireachtas committee hearings, but also in media training, crisis management, dealing with communications around crisis management, and in addition.
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's fine. Thank you. So in terms of the control plan, in responses given to this committee, you have stated that this is signed off by Brussels. But who drafts the control plan?
So it's a matter for the Minister to submit a control plan.
Does the SFPA draft the control plan?
So the previous control plan, the one that's in place at the moment, the Minister of the day asked the SFPA to submit the application on behalf of Ireland.
So you do draft the control plan?
We draft and negotiate with the Commission in relation to the
control plan. The SFPA drafts the control plan. So in terms of the oversight that Deputy Maxwell and other deputies have talked about that we have seen at factories, that is designed and drafted by the SFPA, not by the European Commission.
It's negotiated with the European Commission, Deputy, and it's shared with the Minister before it's submitted to the Commission.
Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied that the control plan drafted by our Fisheries Protection Authority is identical to the control plans operational in other European member states?
No two control plans would be identical, Deputy.
Why not?
Because
it's the same law. Why not?
Well, the circumstances in Ireland are different. For example,
could you outline what those circumstances are?
Well, what particular sector are you talking about here?
Fisheries.
In general?
Yeah, fisheries in general, yeah. So and factories, fish production factories, sea fishing vessels. Are the control plan that you drafted, you had the freedom to do that, is that control plan the same as operational in other European member states? Because remember, it's the same European law. So can you just tell me that?
Okay, I'll hand over to Ms Patterson for the detail in relation to that, Deputy.
Thank you, Deputy. So Ireland obtained a new control plan in 2022. This was signed off on by the Commission. Other member states would have got control plans at various different times throughout the legislative, I suppose, shelf life of the previous legislation. So as I say, they would have been taken at different periods of time. They are all different. There is no harmonised approach in relation to control plans. Why not? It was recognised at the time that it was up to the member states to submit.
But why is ours more strict than other member states?
So in relation to where we were at the time with the industry, additional measures and control measures had to be put in place in order to satisfy the Commission that Ireland could control the 95% of landings that would be transported after weighing. So as I mentioned before, 1 in 20 is weighed upon landing under the supervision of the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority. Going forward and in the future legislation, there will be a much more harmonised approach across all of the member states, and in fact there will be a template.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Is that you acknowledging that the current control plan drafted by the SFPA here in Ireland is not harmonised with other European, and it's not a level playing pitch across Europe?
As I say, the overarching legislation is the same. However, additional measures have to be put in place across all of the member states, depending on their circumstances, depending on the types of fisheries that they're controlling. So as I say, there are nuanced differences between all of the different control plans.
Okay, so we have talked about in this committee the huge corporations that operate within the common fisheries policy. So I just want to talk about, and I'll be saying nothing that will get me into disrepute or take advantage of privilege, to be clear, Cahirla. So Parleveleit and Vanderplas, they're a massive corporation based in Holland, okay? They have just launched a new vessel, the Annie Helena, okay? The capacity here, daily production, is 400 metric tonne of fish per day. It's absolutely huge. Out of the pelagic factories in Ireland, I think, according to my research here, only 2 would have a higher capacity than that one vessel. It's extraordinary, and only 1 would match it. So, in other words, 5 out of the 8 wouldn't match the capacity within that vessel. So can you tell us today that the approach of the SFPA when that vessel is in our waters will be absolutely identical to the pelagic fish production factories here in Ireland? So the oversight and all of the approaches I have seen, Deputy Maxwell, Senator Boyle, Deputy Gallagher, that we've all seen visually, will you take exactly the same approach to this vessel when it's in Irish waters?
Thank you, Deputy. Ireland's control plan is for weighing after transport following landing of fish. These vessels operate under different pieces of legislation around Article 60 of the control regulation. So to say they have to be approved to, first of all, weigh on landing, and second of all, then sample weigh their product as it's being landed frozen. So as I say, there are differences between, as I say, they're not operating under a control plan to weigh after transport. They're operating under a control plan to weigh on board.
Are you satisfied that, I mean, in Killybegs in one factory, we've seen, obviously tamper-proof weighing devices. We've seen multiple CCTV cameras that are beamed directly to SFPA headquarters. We've seen the fact that these factories have to retain that footage, I think, for 6 months. Afterwards, you can, of course, have a no-warning inspection at any time. Are you satisfied that the oversight on these vessels, remember, it's a level playing pitch, they're operating in our waters, are you satisfied, wherever they land, that you have the same oversight of those vessels and their production as is the case for Irish vessels and Irish production factories? Are there CCTV, multiple cameras on board? Are your inspectors able to board freely at any stage? Have you got all that apparatus in place?
As mentioned, there are a number of difficulties with boarding vessels at sea. One of those is in relation to whether these vessels are fishing off the north-west coast of Ireland, which during the period that they are fishing, which is usually January through to the end of March, is quite difficult to do any boardings because of the weather conditions. So it is regrettable that we are unable to get people on board. We would like to have observers on board. However, we are awaiting approval from the Minister, and communication has been sent to the Minister, and we are awaiting a response to that. So to answer your question in part, Deputy, yes, we would like to have more inspections of these vessels at sea. Going forward from 2028 onwards, there will be REM on board that we will have access to as the coastal state where they will be fishing.
Are you satisfied that REM is reliable?
I suppose it's been recognised as the tool that gives the most reliability in relation to production, and in particular in relation to compliance with the landing obligation.
Okay, my time is out. I'll come back in later.
Deputy Ward.
I'm just going to take off where Deputy McLaughlin took off. When was it sent to the Minister regarding inspectors on board?
It was after the last meeting, Deputy. If you give us a few minutes, we'll root out the exact date, but it's November 2025.
Okay, that's fine. Right, I'll move on quick here. The last time you were in here, there seemed to be confusion about who the SFPA were accountable to now, and I apologise I was in late here, so this could have been answered already. Can you tell us, tell the committee, or which body are the SFPA now accountable to?
Can I ask you, Deputy, accountable in what sense?
As in what we were talking about before. Who do you answer to? Who do you answer to when there's an issue? Who is it? Do you answer to us, the Fishing Committee? Do you answer to Minister Timmy Dooley? That's what I'm trying to establish here.
Okay, and obviously the reason that I'm asking for clarification there, Deputy, is there's different reporting mechanisms for different aspects. So financial would be one aspect, HR, corporate governance. But look, I'll ask my colleague, Ms Murphy, to go through the generalities of it, and perhaps if you have any specific one that you want to
I'll give it this, right, okay. What we're wanting to hear is clarity on what powers you have, who are you accountable to, and which way, who is the body who is your top boss? Who do you answer? Who are you totally accountable to? That's what I'm wanting to know.
So I'll ask Ms Murphy to take you through the different elements of that, Deputy.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. So I suppose the executive structure of the SFPA is I suppose it's different to the typical structure of other public bodies, where there would be a board and there's a separation of power then between the board and the CEO. Under the 2006 Act, the authority structure is provided for under Section 47 of that Act, and it is the authority members who are responsible for the full-time day-to-day operation of the organisation. And the Act provides that there must be at least one and up to 3 then authority members. The Minister will appoint then one of those authority members to be the executive chairperson. So it's Mr Finn, Mr Hayes and myself are the authority members for the SFPA. There's what I would call a multi-layered approach in terms of governance and accountability then, which is similar to many other public bodies. And much of, I suppose, the framework for that is included in the 2006 Act. But in addition, we comply with all public sector corporate governance public rules and regulations, including the Code of Practice for the Governance of State Bodies. So within Section 68 of the Act, the Executive Chairperson is accountable to the Public Accounts Committee and indeed to this committee. From a corporate governance perspective, we have an oversight and performance delivery agreement with the Department. Under Section 65 of the Act, we are required to maintain proper books of account, and those books of account are audited on an annual basis by the Controller and Auditor General. And in addition, under Section 66 of the Act, we're required to have in place a 3-year statement of strategy. The period of that strategy currently is 2024 to 2026. I suppose, we would have a number of high-level corporate governance meetings with the Department throughout a calendar year. And as part of that, we would report to the Department then on our KPIs within the Statement of Strategy. I suppose from the point of view of the Code of Practice, the SFPA has also appointed an Audit and Risk Committee. And there are 5 members currently of that Audit and Risk Committee. All of them are independent and non-executive members. They support the SFPA with regard to risk management, internal controls, corporate governance. And I suppose just in terms of, operational oversight and even the role of internal audit, I suppose the role of internal audit and the, I suppose every public sector body wants to continuously improve their systems and their processes and their operations. Because we are a regulator, we have a very distinct internal audit function in that you have your typical corporate internal audits, which would be in areas such as finance, HR, risk management, but we also have technical internal audits, and we're required to have those under European regulations.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. Right, can you please comment on the relationship between the SFPA enforcement bodies active in Ireland's EEZ, and do you believe that there are sufficient arrangements in place to protect from overfishing by non-Irish vessels?
Sorry, Deputy, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Right, so can you please comment on the relationship between the SFPA enforcement bodies and active in Ireland's EEZ? Do you believe that there are sufficient arrangements in place to protect from overfishing by non-Irish vessels?
sorry, the relationship between the SFPA
And the EEZ.
So the EEZ is the
Yeah,
economic zone.
yeah.
So do you mean other fishery
Other
control
fish-
authorities in
yes.
other member states?
Yes.
Okay, Deputy. So, and the relationship between?
But the relationship between you and them, and what is the process on reviewing it as in overfishing by non-Irish vessels in our waters?
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy. So Ireland operates quite closely with the European Fisheries Control Agency, and there we regularly undertake meetings with other member states who are active within the Irish EEZ. So as I say, on a fortnightly basis, we would discuss any ongoing threats, any information that they may have in relation to their vessels that we may not have access to.
Okay.
But also we operate in a wider, I suppose, capacity in that there's joint deployment plans on an annual basis that are undertaken where we look at specific risks across all of the vessels and all of the fleet segments fishing within not only Irish waters but in Union waters. One of those would be within the Irish EEZ. So we would have specific plans in place to monitor these, to identify the threats, to address any of the threats, and to undertake specific inspection regimes on these higher risk vessels. So as I say, it goes across the board, irrespective of flag. We look at the threats. So it's not just looking at Irish vessels or for other member states' vessels or for third country vessels.
And have you meet every fortnight?
We meet every fortnight virtually.
Okay.
And then we also have larger meetings then face-to-face twice a year by the steering group and twice a year by what we call the technical joint deployment group as well.
Okay, okay.
And as I say, those are coordinated by EFCA and all of the member states who would be fishing in what we call Western waters, which is primarily off of Ireland, would be involved in.
Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Deputy Gallagher.
Yeah, first of all, have any of you or all of you visited the ports, whether it be Killybegs, Rossaville, Dunmore East, Castletown, to witness at first hand how the operation works from the time that the fish are landed, the skipper hails the quantities that are in that, right through to the weighing in the factories? And have you witnessed the absurdity of this and the waste of time? And have you, if you consider all of this to be an absurdity, have you made any proposals to whoever, whether it's the executive chairman or to the minister, to change these?
So the answer to that, Deputy, is yes, we have witnessed it. Indeed, Ms. Patterson was an on-the-ground sea fishery protection officer for many years, so has been involved in those inspections at the coalface, so to speak. But I personally have done what you have asked the question about. I've looked at a landing from end to end. But I presume you're talking specifically in relation to pelagic landings here, and the control plan, Deputy, I guess, is what you're getting at rather than demersal landings or landings by smaller vessels.
I'm talking about all landings.
Okay, so I mean the bigger pelagic landings, obviously into Killybegs, are landings that take a long period of time. But a landing by a small vessel into one of the other ports that you mentioned, Dunmore East or Rossaville or wherever, can take a matter of minutes. But look, the ones into the pelagic factories in Killybegs certainly can take a day or more in some cases. And yes, there is a lot to go through in those landings. There is a lot of regulations to be met. They're not regulations that the SFPA put in place. They're regulations that the EU Commission generally have put in place. And some of them arise from the control plan, which was approved by the European Commission.
The control plan, which is approved by the Commission, is it the control plan that you submitted, or when you submitted the control plan, then is the one that Deputy McLaughlin referred to, then did they propose any changes to that control plan?
It's Ireland's control plan, Deputy, and yes, there was a number of iterations to it. There was a number of meetings around it. There was a lot of negotiation around it. The Commission wanted it to be far more stringent than it actually ended up being at the end.
I'm watching the clock. So can you tell us how much more stringent could it be? Do they want to weigh every single fish? And I'm being facetious when I say that. How much more stringent can that be? And I've asked the question, do one of you, and I know Ms Patterson has been on the ground, so will be very familiar, have you taken the opportunity, Executive Chairman, to do what anyone would expect you to do, to go and inspect it, whether it takes an hour or a day or 2 days, to see what happens on the ground? I'll ask you that.
No, I've already answered that, Deputy. I have.
Where did you do it?
In Killybegs.
When was the last time?
Oh.
Was it in your farm?
I'd have to look at my calendar, Deputy, but the last time that I looked at the operation end to end, I'd be guessing was 2024.
And has anything changed since then?
No, that would have been done under the current control plan.
Right. Can I ask the question, I think Mr Murphy would answer this one. The other countries, are there any of the other countries who operate as we do here? Any other countries have all infringements to be criminal?
Thanks, Deputy. The honest answer is I don't know the systems in all of the other member states who are operating under what's given to us under the 2006 Act, and it's a policy decision in terms of the sanctions which are available.
Well, with all due respects, I would have thought that one of you, or all of you, would have known or would have compared how it is dealt with in Ireland as against other countries. Because my understanding is in other countries there are infringements that are penalty points. And could I ask you, between the time that I laid out on the rescinding of the penalty point system back in the period 2016 to 2020, from the time that was overturned by the government who came in 2020, in the interregnum of that time, what changed?
In terms of the point system,
yeah,
that you're referring to, there was the new statutory instrument which was introduced in 2020.
Yeah, but between the time of the rescinding of the previous one and that period, what changed? Sorry, maybe Mr. Finn wants to answer that, or he's indicating.
Well, in the context of saying what had changed, it changed. There was change in the circumstances in that the Commission and DG Mara would say who we are also accountable for and who we do report and who've got considerable power over us. Would say in the context that it was DG Mara who came along and rescinded our control plan initially, going back in 22. But they also have the power to withhold funding to Ireland. And in the case of Ireland not having a point system in place, funding was withheld until such time we brought in the point system. So, that change in that interperiod period that where Ireland had to bring in the point system, otherwise DG Mara and the Commission were holding us accountable for not having the system in place, because if you have to bear in mind that those point systems were supposed to be in place since 2010, yet it was 2020, 2022 before Ireland actually brought those point systems into place. So we were at odds with other European countries in that context.
I'm watching the clock. That's a factual answer, so I can't dispute it. But during that period, are you suggesting that the EU held back transfers to Ireland over all of that period?
I'm saying there was an issue with funding, we'll say, under the EMF, and the Commission were saying to Ireland, if you don't put your point system in place, then you won't get the funding that you're entitled to until such time as this matter is resolved, and it eventually was resolved.
Who can tell me how much funding could we have lost out? If there was no funding provided from the time that they insisted there had to be penalty points, for that period of time, how many millions? Maybe billions.
Really, Deputy, that's a question for the Minister rather than for the SFPA. As our questions around the statutory instrument and the introduction of it, we have no role in relation to legislation or policy or indeed EU funding. So really, there are questions for
fair man to bat. Now,
yeah,
I'm sure you. Hold on, Executive Chairman. I'm sure you've taken an interest at the time when a case was being made to the Minister and from the Minister to the government at the time, that millions were in jeopardy, or that millions were being held, or millions were frozen. Did you not take an interest in that?
But that's really a matter for the Minister and for the Department and the Managing Authority for
So
the
if we put down a question to the Minister to ask him, might we get an answer, or will you have any input at all?
I wouldn't have any input into it, Deputy. It would be, Deputy, we left the question hanging a while ago if you want to go back to it.
No, I don't have time to go back, but I'll have a second chance.
Okay.
I'll ask you, on this tranche, I'll ask you one. Would any of you accept that the relationships between SFPA and the industry, whether it's producer or processor, are at an all-time low?
So I guess this comes up from time to time, Deputy, and I wonder sometimes what people mean when they say the relationship between the SFPA and the industry, because we have people out on piers every day of the week meeting fishermen, meeting vessel owners, licence holders, that are interacting with them every day of the week, and we also have executive functions in Clonakilty. So do you mean the relationship between me as executive chairperson and the sector, or do you mean the relationship between a sea fishery protection officer standing on a pier talking to a fisherman?
No, you've been facetious there. I'm talking, and I've asked you, and I'm sure you can accept the question. I'm talking about the body SFPA and the industry. Do you accept that they're on an all-time low, and that you people act in such a way as to try and create difficulties for the industry, whether it be the processing, that had not happened in any other country? And if it was on a scale from 0 to 10, I would venture to say, well, other countries are in 7 and 8, but you people are in 0.
Well, no, Deputy, I don't accept that at all. And I mean, what I said at the last meeting, and I'll say it again, is what the organisation is doing is implementing the regulations that are in place there. We don't make up any of these regulations. We simply implement them.
I'll ask you the next time about the basket and the bucket and the colours.
Margaret, I'm going to put a number of questions myself at this point of the meeting, and hopefully we'll get more in the way of answers than we did the last time. And I'll go back to a set of questions that I was asking the last time, and I didn't get satisfactory answers. I've no qualms in saying, but it relates to inspections at sea, and particularly inspections of factory vessels, both European Union flagged vessels and third country vessels. And Deputy Maxwell put the question, how many inspections of these vessels took place over the last 5 years? He got a partial answer, 0 so far this year, 4 last year, but no figures for the previous year. So if I could put that question again, how many inspections at sea took place of both European and non-EU flagged factory vessels operating in Irish waters over the last 5 years?
Thank you, Deputy. Yes, indeed. And as mentioned, we do have a lot of problems in relating to undertaking these inspections. I don't actually have the exact figures for the last 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, there's 0 for this year for pelagic factory vessels, and there was 4 for last year for pelagic factory vessels.
And do we know for 2024?
I don't have those figures for the pelagic factory vessels.
2023.
As mentioned, I don't have those figures for the pelagic factory vessels, but I do have the total figures for the non-EU vessels, OMS vessels and Irish vessels.
Can I just say, so I asked a very particular question, and I'm the second member to ask it here. I asked it back in November as well, and as I said in November, I would expect that in preparation for this meeting, that one of the 5 of you representing the SFPA would have access to that information. I'm saying this as chair of the Fisheries and Maritime Affairs Committee. It is not satisfactory that any agency or body of the state would come before any committee of the Oireachtas without having figures to hand. I mean, these are basic figures. You surely anticipated that this would be a point of questioning that several members have already put, and that I'm now as chairperson putting. So it is utterly satisfactory, and I think that has to be understood and accepted. And the next time you appear before this committee, please, if you need to bring further officials and have them behind you, if you need to bring reports and documentation, please have them with you, because it is utterly unsatisfactory at this point. My next question, have you the figures, Mr. Hayes? Sorry, have you the figures, Mr. Hayes? Because that is, I want an answer to my question, not an excuse.
So we have figures for inspections at sea, but we haven't figures specifically for factory freezer vessels to date, but we can supply those. But we can give you the figures in relation to
Well, I asked a
vessels.
very specific question. I would like an answer to that specific question with respect. And you offering me the answer to another question that I didn't ask is not satisfactory.
Well,
so I hope you take that point.
I do, Deputy, and we can
Thank you.
certainly provide the information for you after this meeting. But we did write to the clerk and ask him in advance of the meeting, was there any data in particular that the committee wanted, either prior to the meeting or
Sorry, I'm going to
or
cut
on
you
the day?
off at this point, Mr. Hayes, because I have to say it is utterly frustrating that after the last meeting we had a drip feed of responses back to questions that members had put in good faith. We have done our preparations ahead of these meetings. We take them seriously. And we have had a drip feed of responses coming back from SFPA, and we're grateful for the information when it comes. But with respect, and this comes down to accountability and transparency, we don't need to provide you with lists of questions before you appear here to give your evidence. I mean, you told us at the last meeting that this is the only body effectively, outside of financial issues, this is the only body to which you are accountable. And we have this constant issue with trying to get answers. And I'd venture to say if you put as much effort maybe into preparing the facts and the data to respond to our questions rather than the communications piece that you identified after the last meeting, perhaps we wouldn't be having this back and forth and we'd just be getting on with the business of the meeting.
Yeah.
I ask you accept that criticism.
I absolutely accept that. We certainly will provide the data. To say the figures are small, Deputy, for the reasons that have been previously outlined, right, and that there is an issue with surface inspections at sea and the level of service provided by the naval service. So the figures are going to be in the region of what Ms Patterson has quoted.
So between 0 and 4 per annum, approximately.
At a guess, that's
okay.
what it's going to be.
Okay, but thank you for hazarding the guess, and I won't hold you to those exact figures, but I would ask that you would provide them by the end of the week. I think that's reasonable that you would have those provided by the end of the week to us. Of course, we should have them now.
We'll do that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, if we have such modest, to put it gently, inspection of these very large factory vessels operating in Irish waters, is there a risk, and is this a risk that you have identified, that there will be overfishing where there is no inspection and there is no knowledge, certainly within the Irish authority, of that happening? And the second part of that question, is there a sharing of intelligence or data from other European Union fisheries protection agencies with regard to those vessels that do operate in Irish waters?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as Ms Patterson has already outlined, Chairman, we would like to be doing more surface inspections at sea. We use every surface asset that's available to us to get officers out there to do them. The difficulties with the naval service are well known. And the figures are stark when you look at the decrease that I've outlined in the opening statement of the inspections at sea. In relation to the second part of your question, Deputy, without going into the specifics, yes, there is information shared between the different control authorities of member states.
And can I ask, is that soft information, or is it actionable data that can be shared and released?
So, by way of example, Deputy, a logbook on a vessel over a certain size has to be completed by midnight every night, and that information is shared across all member states electronically.
And so, for example, when these factory vessels do eventually land their catch at a European Union port, for example, and I know some of them will land them at third country ports as well, to what extent has SFPA eyes on what comes off those ships?
So if it doesn't land in Ireland...
Yeah, so to what extent are your colleague organisations in other European countries providing that information to you?
So the SFPA wouldn't have any eyes on it if it's landing in another member state? So
effectively, just to summarise that, effectively the state here and the government and its various arms and agencies is utterly blind to the amount of fish that is being taken caught in Irish waters by these factory ships. We have no oversight of that, barring the self-reporting in the logs.
Well, it's replicated on the logbooks, but don't forget, Deputy, that, I mean, the concept of the common fisheries policy here is that there's an obligation on every member state's control authorities to control their own vessels wherever they fish. The same way as Ireland has responsibility for the Irish EEZ, but also for Irish vessels wherever they fish.
Okay, and I would venture to say that we have no assurance, and from your response there is no assurance that is taking place, because we have no eyes on data. And that is a huge gap and a huge risk, and I think it's more of a risk than any other fishing activity in Irish waters.
So, Collier, look, at the risk of getting into a political discussion here, the Commission's view is that outside 12 miles is European Union waters, and that the control activity is shared across the member states while the vessels are fishing in Union waters, as they call them.
But yet the SFPA does, when it possibly can, which isn't often, seemingly undertake at-sea vessels.
Absolutely.
So at-sea inspections of vessels.
So each member state has an obligation within their own EEZ to carry out control functions. So insofar as the SFPA is able to, absolutely we carry out control functions based on the risk criteria as outlined by Ms. Patterson on vessels as much as we can.
Okay. Deputy, if I may come in there just as well. While we have struggled to get surface assets out to undertake inspections at sea, we do undertake aerial surveillance of these particular vessels, and we've had such monitoring programmes underway this year, supported by the EFCA chartered aircraft, and we had inspectors not on board the craft but examining the live feed, coming back and to follow up on any non-compliances, any and all non-compliances that were detected, in particular around these particular high-risk vessels.
Sorry to cut across you, but that where detected is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, if you don't mind me saying so, that any and all sounds very good, but any and all that were detected in those very limited circumstances. Yes. I think that is what people watching this and members here are very concerned about.
Obviously, I can't go into the specifics of any individual cases, so I'm trying to be as general as possible, and I'm sure you appreciate that. So as I say, there is follow-up investigations underway in a number of circumstances relating to these particular vessels and this particular fleet, following on from aerial surveillance. We also use satellite imagery as well. So we do make the best of the resources that are available to us in the absence of sea surface assets.
Okay, and I think we all appreciate that the naval service here is utterly under-resourced, and it's laughable sometimes to hear government representatives talking about maritime security when we can't even have our have factory vessels operating within our waters inspected. Finally, and with the indulgence of the members, because there will be a second round of questions, I won't come in for that, but we have some data here in terms of the numbers of files that have been prepared and sent to the DPP in each year. How many files have been prepared and sent to the DPP by SFPA relating to factory vessels, infringements by factory vessels, both European Union and non-EU, operating in Irish waters over the, well, we've 10 years of figures here, so in the last 10 years?
I'll explain that we don't have a breakdown per type of vessel. We have a breakdown in terms of the flag vessel, but if it's a factory vessel or a non-factory vessel, we wouldn't have that particular breakdown. However, we can provide that data.
Okay, have you it by Irish flagged vessel versus EU flagged, non-Irish EU flagged vessel versus third country flagged vessel in terms of file sent to DPP?
So for at-sea inspections,
and give me maybe last year just as an example.
Sure, yeah. So last year,
to read out a table for 10 years.
In 2025, there were 14 case files submitted in relation to at-sea inspections. One was for a Spanish vessel, 2 for French vessels, 2 for German vessels, and 9 for Irish vessels.
Can you explain why there's significantly more Irish vessels? Is that because they tend to be fishing in areas that are easier to carry out a surface inspection? Because I think, you know, any of us who's watching the transponder data will see that there is a lot of European Union flagged vessels operating in Irish waters.
As mentioned earlier, Deputy, 92% of the or over 92% of the activity within the Irish EEZ is by Irish vessels.
92% of fishing activity.
Fishing activity is by Irish vessels.
And are we talking by ton of fish caught, or are we talking by individual vessels? Because that would skew that figure.
I'll get you the tonnage as well, because I have that. In relation to tonnage from the EEZ, 55.5% of tonnage caught in the Irish EEZ is by Irish vessels. 27.7% is by other member states' vessels, and 16.8% is by non-EU vessels.
55% by Irish vessels, and we're talking about So that's a long way off 92, and that's why I wanted to ask that question in terms of tonnage and in terms of individual vessels, because we understand that there are smaller inshore vessels and smaller offshore vessels that operate closer to the coast, but our EEZ is huge. I better pass over to other members. So I have Deputy Maxwell. First, we'll go for 5 minutes, Deputy,
okay.
then Deputy McLaughlin and Senator Boyle in that order.
First off, Mr. Hayes, I think it summed it up. Is why fishermen think of the SFPA. You were asked a question by Deputy Gallagher, and incredulously and so arrogantly, you said, I answered that in Killybegs 2 years ago. Well, I wasn't in Killybegs 2 years ago. I wasn't a member of this House. Now, someone, the chairman of a state organisation, to be asked a question in a committee of the House, the Oireachtas, and to say, I answered that 2 years ago in Killybegs, go and feck yourselves. I can't get over. That's just beyond. I come from an inland county. We grow mushrooms. One of the best mushroom companies in Ireland operate. If you're ever finished in this job, you should take up mushroom farming, because you're the best man I ever seen to keep people in the dark and feed them plenty of bull. Now, Mr. Murphy, back to page 4 and the court cases. In 2022, 85 cases were brought forward. In 2023, 87 cases were brought forward. And in 2024, 84 cases were brought forward. Sorry? Is that, I'm okay to keep going on, is this right? In 2022, 57 cases were directed on by the DPP. In 2023, 52 cases were directed on by the DPP, and in 2024, 60 cases were brought on by the DPP. So in the figures that you have there, in 2022, 24 cases aren't accounted for here. In 2023, 17 cases aren't accounted for in that graph, and in 2024, 38. So there's 79 cases unaccounted for here in that graph. Now, you'd probably say to me, oh, they haven't been dealt with, or they're sitting there. But like, there's 79 cases that aren't accounted for. And another question is, in 11 years, you offered direction in 415 cases. Sorry, the DP has offered direction on 415 cases, of which over 70% are sent forward to the courts for hearing. Is that an increase, say, between 22 and 25 than, say, between 15 and 20? Has that been an increase in cases that are taken? Or are those 85, 87, because they're all around in those 3 years? There's between 87, 3 cases difference in the 3 years. It's very funny that it's all the same amount of cases. You go back down. I didn't go back through the rest of the years, but has there been an increase in the amount of cases you've taken, say, from between 22 and now?
So just the first part of the question, in terms of the cases that wouldn't feature in the concluded figures here, you're correct that they're in the system. Okay, so there are matters before the courts which have not been finalised yet. In terms of the number of cases, I would suggest that there has been an increase in the number of inspections over the past 5 years, for example. So I think increased inspection activity will give rise to increased detected alleged non-compliances. So I think that would be the context to that.
Okay, and how long, do you have an average of how long a case from it starts till it's finished? What is there an average? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
I wouldn't have an average calculated. It depends. Some cases are concluded within 48 hours. If there's a detention, some take longer for various reasons in the criminal justice system. So unfortunately, I haven't got an average.
Okay.
For you, Deputy. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Deputy McLaughlin. Quick no mate, 5 minutes.
Okay, Gurmagat, Cahirla. So just to revisit the issue of the super factory vessels that are in our waters, so can you just tell us how many days per annum with the Dutch, it's a fleet really of freezer trawlers, how many days per annum would they be within the Irish EEZ?
Thank you, Deputy McLaughlin. I suppose this is quite difficult to calculate because some of the vessels that you are referring to are not Dutch. They may be Dutch-owned, but they're flagged in a number of different member states, as you're well aware. We don't have the exact figures for this particular fleet of vessels as to how much activity they have.
No, I appreciate that. That's actually helpful. You mentioned about the flag issue. So my understanding is that these vessels can change flags while at sea. So you could have the Polish flag, Lithuanian flag, even the German flag while they're at sea. And then you could have quota, that could be a bit of German quota, a bit of Polish quota, a bit of Dutch quota. So you can have a vessel at sea, changing flags, operating with quota from different countries, perfectly legal within the common fisheries policy. So you see where I'm going with this, right? So you have a fixed Irish factory that has all of the array of observation of their weighing system. You have the CCTV, you know, all of that. And yet you have in our waters, under the jurisdiction of the Common Fisheries Policy, you know, it's the same framework, same umbrella, no oversight. I guess no oversight. I mean, my understanding is that they're allowed to weigh on board. So they weigh on board. Are Irish vessels allowed to weigh on board? Are they allowed under our control plan? So if an Irish vessel's landing pelagic fish, well, let's do the same thing. Are they allowed to weigh on board?
Indeed, Deputy McLaughlin. There is a separate control plan there to allow vessels to weigh on board. So as I say, there's nothing stopping the Irish pelagic fleet from weighing on board if they wish to weigh on board, but unfortunately with the setup that they have in landing in refrigerated seawater tanks, that's not possible because it's not individually boxed and separated on board.
You'll see the issue. I mean, if you were to capture one of the primary concerns of our committee members over the last two meetings, it's that there just isn't a level playing pitch. You know, that's our difficulty. I don't have any issue whatsoever in having a law that ensures that there's a sustainable catch of fishery. I don't have an issue at all with an enforcement authority and laws. My issue is it's not commonly applied across Europe. So there's not a level playing pitch. And we've got to the point in Ireland, and I'm making a statement rather than questions, you know, based on what I've seen, that we have an enforcement policy that goes beyond common sense. I compared it with the jar of sweets at being a fair, and you're asked to guess how many sweets and you win a prize if you get close or if you're lucky enough to guess the right number. And that appears to me very similar to what fishermen are asked to do in terms of their catch on board. And if they're outside the 10% scope, they're going to get a fine. So that takes me to my final sort of questions. This whole area of administrative fines versus the criminal approach that we have here in Ireland, I think we're quite unique in how we deal with this. And my question would be, just in relation to Barry, okay? My understanding, Barry, is that in the past, the state solicitors and the counties involved would have had oversight before a file is sent to the DPP. They would have been consulted. Is that still the case? Are you consulting with the local state solicitors before you send a file to the DPP? That's the first question. And the second question is, why, and I know you've said earlier you're not aware of, the level of administrative fines versus criminal fines that are taken. I mean, when you have a minor infringement, do you have the flexibility to look at an administrative fine as you would, for example, in other areas under your jurisdiction? So when you're dealing with a fisherman, in other areas under SFPA's jurisdiction, my understanding is you have flexibility on whether you impose a fine or take somebody to court. So just take me through the flexibility, take me through the way you work with the local state solicitors, how it ends up with the DPP. Why do you go down the road? Is it about that you can say you have prosecuted X amount of fishermen I just want to get a sense, what's the level of seriousness? I mean, you see in this information you've given us, it's not clear the level of seriousness.
Have to conclude with your question and give them a chance to answer.
Yeah, well, everybody else got about 2 minutes extra, so if you don't mind, a bit of forbearance. So what I just want to be clear about is, in terms of the cases, I'm not clear on the level of seriousness of those cases. Could it have been an administrative fine? Should it have gone to court in the first place? And this takes us to the point Deputy Maxwell puts us, that because you don't have an oversight body, you don't have anybody policing you. And with respect to your fine career, Mr. Finn in the Garda Síochána, as you know, there was a Garda oversight body there, which you probably appreciated at times. So just to get a sense, Barry, of all of that, okay? And that'll wrap me up. Thanks, Ciara.
Thanks, Deputy. So prior to, I think it was 2023, there was a state solicitor who was given delegated authority by the DPP to direct on fisheries cases. That changed. So now all directions are issued from the DPP headquarters. So there are staff within the DPP's office who deal with sea fisheries cases. So we don't go to state solicitors prior to the submission of a case file to the DPP. So I hope that answers that first question. In terms of the logistics of that, we submit a file to the DPP, and then we receive a direction, which is, well, we're copied in the direction. It's given to the state solicitor to provide to undertake the prosecution proceedings. You referred to other, I suppose, enforcement mechanisms under the SFPA. Yes, under food safety law, we can issue compliance notices, fixed payment notices, and we have, I suppose, a clear structure there for officers to know, right, if this is the type of infringement, this is the guidance in terms of what, appropriate enforcement action one should take. So that goes from an advisory to a compliance notice, fixed payment notice, to the ultimate option of a prosecution if the seriousness of the offence warranted a prosecution. So for, as I've outlined earlier on, the only sanction available under the fisheries control remit, well, there's the administrative process of the penalty points, of the points process, and under the 06 Act, then there's the to submit a file to the DPP for the criminal justice process. So all infringements are where enforcement action is warranted, has to go through that process. There may be exceptional situations where it's a de minimis breach and an advisory or a warning will be given to someone in relation, an operator or a master in relation to that, but where there's a significant deviation from the regulatory standards, we are required under the control regulation to apply sanctions, quote unquote. So it's very specific in relation to the obligations on the member state. So I hope that gives some detail in relation to that process.
Yeah, I don't have enough time to come back, but that's fine. Yeah.
Senator Boyle.
Just to come back on what I started earlier about the sampling plan, or the sample, the 25 kg sample out of every 25 tonne, and that factories are forced to record, and the current control plan, a year's fully okay with that, or is every other country doing the same too? It's just like I would like to know what other countries too is doing about this sampling.
Thank you, Senator Boyle. Yes, every other country also has to undertake catch recording, and particularly in relation to bulk pelagics, where the fish are mixed when they're landed, it is problematic. So sampling plans are in place in other member states, and sampling regimes are undertaken as well. Depending on the type of fisheries that they have, there will be different sampling rates and different sample size taken. But every member state that's involved in bulk pelagics has to have facility there in order to be able to record accurately the catch that has been landed.
So yours is happy with the sampling the way it is now?
As I say, like what we have in place at the current time under the current control plan and under the current sampling plan is a minimum of 25 kilos per 25 tonnes of fish landed, or 25 kilograms per transport unit. This is a derogation away from 100% separation of the fish and to be weighed by species. So as I say, processors have the option of 100% separation if they feel that that's a better alternative.
Right.
As I say, that's the primary legislation. A derogation is provided in recognition of the onerous task of separating, in some cases, maybe 1,000 tonnes of fish that are mixed.
Right, I'll move on because time's very short. You know, we're talking here about oversight and everything like that. We have third countries coming into the EEZ there. You know, just take Norway, for instance, they're down fishing blue whiting. To the people at home listening in now, can you tell me what happens? They come down, they catch their fish, they record it to you, is that the way it is? And they go home, they land their fish. Who up there has control, or who has oversight of what of the land?
Thank you. Indeed, Senator, there has been increased activity by the Norwegian fleet in the Irish EEZ this year. And we have seen an increased number of landings into Killybegs this year compared with other years as well. So a lot of that fish is actually being landed into Killybegs and is being put through the same regime that Irish vessels and other member states' vessels are being put through. When we look at the at-sea inspection figures for these particular vessels, every 1 in 33 trips is likely to be inspected, whereas when we look at the Irish fleet, it's every 1 in 250 vessels. So as I say, there is a better chance of being inspected at sea, however remote that may be due to weather conditions off the northwest. There's a higher chance of a non-EU vessel being inspected than an Irish vessel.
Yeah. No, I take your point, and to be honest, they're in Killybegs. I have no problem with that. But the problem, from what I am hearing, is when they go back to land in a third country, who from the EEC has oversight to what they land or the tonnage they land?
As I say, once it leaves the European or once it leaves EU waters, we no longer see their logbook. We only have access to their logbook for when they've been fishing within Union waters.
So really, it's nobody sees nothing.
As I say, we can see what they've caught in EU waters, but we can't see what they've caught outside of EU waters.
Right. And just time's running out too on me here again. You know, Deputy McLaughlin did come on about the factory ships, and he's right about the change in flags. And you know, there's not. Is there anything can be done about that? You know, like even through this house here, is there anything that we can be, like, especially when they're in the EEZ waters? I mean, I think what's going on, to be honest, is totally wrong, and there needs to be something put in place. Can we start as a committee here to move that forward?
Thanks, Senator. I mean, really, and we've underpinned this in answer to a number of questions at the committee. All the SFPA can do is implement the regulations that are there. So really, your question would be better put to the Minister or the EU Commission in relation to the regulations that are there, and maybe in relation to preventing what you're describing from happening, but it's not something that's within the control of the SFPA.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Deputy Ward, 5 minutes.
Okay. 1 in 20 boats inspected. As that was said before, you were saying 1 in 20 boats would be inspected.
Yes, so for every 20 boats that land, one would be inspected at landing.
At landing. Yeah. So could you tell me, is it evenly distributed throughout all the ports in Ireland that the inspections happen? So there's a certain amount in the northwest, southwest, northeast?
So this 1 in 20 relates to pelagic landings only. So as I say, it depends on where the landings are. The majority of landings are in Killybegs, so the majority of inspections will take place in that particular port. Where there's pelagic landings into other ports, they also have to meet that requirement of 1 in 20. But obviously by a per volume, per landing basis, the majority of these landings are into Killybegs, so the majority of inspections are in Killybegs.
And moving on to, so the Norwegian boats that are landing in Killybegs, have they all been inspected as to a level? Is there a, do we know what that looks like as in stat-wise?
Yes, so they have to follow the same regime that the Irish vessels have, so they have to go through the same level of inspections. I'm just trying to find the actual inspection data here, apologies. So, thank you. So yes, this year alone there has been a number of inspections on those non-EU vessels, and again it's actually at a similar rate to the Irish vessels.
And how far back does your numbers go, if you don't mind me asking?
5 years back.
5 years back, and is it consistent? So compared to what have we got this year compared to 5 years ago?
So 5 years ago we had 8 landings of non-EU vessels.
Okay.
And we had 50% of those inspected.
Okay.
So this year alone we've had 64 landings of non-EU vessels, and we're talking only pelagics here.
Yeah.
And we've had just over 9% of those inspected.
Okay. Right. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Here, look, with your indulgence, can I come back to Deputy Ward on his earlier question about the date?
Can, yeah.
So the date that I wrote the letter to the Minister in relation to observers on board was the 28th of November 2025.
28th of November.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
Deputy Gallagher.
Thank you. The fact that the landings into Ireland have been reduced drastically now, particularly in relation to pelagic as a result of Brexit, and the 71% went back to 48% as a result of the work of Minister Dooley at the last council meeting. What's the implications there for the sea fishery officers? That the fact that there have been such a drastic reduction, do you deploy them to do some other work?
So, Deputy, the quotas have been reduced, but in fact the landings into Killybegs have increased.
Just explain that to me. What were the landings?
The landings have increased.
Yeah, it's a general statement, so could be more specific.
Year on year. So, Ms. Patterson might have the statistics.
This year, tell us that again. The landings this year in 2026 are greater than the landings in previous years. Landings of what? Are we talking about boarfish? We're not talking about mackerel.
We'll give you the figures here, Deputy.
What's the clock, please?
Yes, thank you, Deputy. So this year, Irish landings into Ireland have actually increased. In previous years, there would have been greater landings of Irish vessels into other member states and third countries. So as I say, the number of landings of Irish vessels back into Ireland has increased this year. The landings from other member states' vessels has also increased this year. And the landings of non-EU vessels has increased from in 2021 it was 8, and this year from January to March was 69. So as I say, we are running on a par in relation to Irish landings, and a slight increase in other member states' landings, but there has been a large increase in non-EU landings into Killybegs.
Okay, I have another specific question for him. I don't know. Back a few years ago, Greencastle, Rathmullen and Burtonport were designated as landing ports for Northern Ireland registered vessels, landing crab largely. And at a later stage, Bunagee, Malin and Glengad were added to this. Maybe it happens just by coincidence. Of course, the Minister happened to be coming from Inishowen. But I'll go further. All designated ports except Burtonport allow landings between 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock Monday to Friday and until 5 o'clock on Saturdays. Burtonport, for some reason, I don't know, is restricted to 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock landings on weekdays and no landings on a Saturday. I mean, that's not a level playing pitch. And the Minister was the first person the Minister met when he came to Donegal on his appointment was someone who is affected as a result of this. And as a result of this, when you can't land on Saturdays into Burtonport, it's a direct impact on the access to the Chinese market. Those who are buying the fish cannot collect them on Saturdays. So that's very wrong. And I'm sure that they will find a way of having a fishery officer available, because it's total discrimination by somebody. And I'm told that it's the SFPA that took the decision. So could you clarify, or could you at least now include Burtonport and ensure that while Donegal is up there in the northwest on its own, that at least Burtonport is not excluded?
So thanks, Deputy Gallagher. The designation of ports for third country landings is a competence of the Minister, not of the SFPA. Generally, the Minister will ask the SFPA for their views in relation to the designation of a particular port. And I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Finn, maybe to run through some of the statistics that he has gained, particularly in relation to Burton Port and any change in the designation.
Well, watch that I'm not cut off after this minute, but it's an important one to me. And let me say again, Mr. Finn, before you come in, I will not, as long as I am in this House, accept that Burton Port, just because I was born there, that Burton Port should be excluded.
Deputy, just to be clear, that's a matter for the Minister, not the SFPA.
God, you haven't answered everything. You have good man.
Well, that's why I'm here, Deputy.
Yeah,
I'm here to answer your questions.
Well, you don't answer them, because the Minister is saying that he is waiting in approval from you people.
There's no approval process that the SFPA...
He's waiting on a recommendation from you people.
He's waiting on a response from the SFPA in relation to...
Hold on. How long have you got this request from the Minister? How long have you got it? And why does it take so long to respond?
I'm not sure, Deputy. I'd have to check to see how long we have it. But what I can certainly ask Mr. Finn to do is to share the information with you so that you're better informed in relation to what the SFPA's recommendation to the Minister will be. But to be clear, again, it's the Minister's decision.
The recommendation.
Deputy, yes, I have been looking at your request, we'll say, in relation to Burton Port. However, we'll say the figures, the statistics didn't, we'll say, back up the request or didn't seem to support your the hypothesis that we should extend the hours on Saturday as well. I mean, we have all the other ports that we included, that you outlined there a few minutes ago there. We added all those ports, we'll say, which do cater for the industry. Now, there is obviously, it's about 2 hours to go from Greencastle over to Burton Port, so, we're struggling as it is to service all the extra ports we put in, but Burton Port, we'll say, I have the stats which I can share with you directly afterwards if you'd like those particular figures on the numbers, which you're probably aware of anyway, but it wasn't obvious that the demand was there for that extra landings to include Saturday as in addition to all the other ports. We have already extended the hours for, as you outlined. But however, we're looking at it, and if we get the extra resources, then we may be able to do that, and certainly we're making a proposition to the Department, to the Minister, to say, look, if we get the extra funding, then we could look at extending, not just in Burton Port, but other ports up there too, the hours. Okay.
Well, are you telling me that the landings to Bunagee, Malin and Glengad are greater than, and was that justified? And I'm supportive of them being included, but to compare to Burton Port, I mean, it's taken such a long time. And how do you know, or what statistics will you base, unless you do a pilot scheme to open it up for a year, how do you know who will land on Saturday? I mean, how can you take a decision on something that you don't have the facts?
Well, we can only look at the data in terms of the amount of landings that's there and how often it's being used, and like you're only talking
about... It's not being used when they can't land.
Well, it is being used actually. There are vessels landing there, but I get your point that if it was
used once. It was used once when a skipper came in outside hours on a Saturday because his child was going to hospital, and it was decided by the SFPA that they were just very fortunate that it wasn't an infringement and it wasn't a force majeure. That's the respect that there was for that man and his child going to hospital. And now you might say it's not me, you're the body responsible for this now. And to say that we don't know, sure, how do you know who'll come in on Saturday when it's not open? Open it up for 12 months and you'll see. I'm angry about it because I think it's discrimination, and I don't think the SFPA should stand over the discrimination of one port and should suggest that it's costing a bit extra to send somebody up from Greencastle. So what? So what? It wouldn't cost as much as you're paying, and we'll ask the question soon, what you're paying by way of having someone come in and prepare you for these meetings, someone who doesn't know anything about the industry. Surely you're all competent enough. So the next time, let's have an answer to the question how much the communications is costing and preparing you people for, I was going to say for giving answers, for not giving answers. So I hope you have a decision soon.
Deputy, we've no issue in sharing how much that training costs, but nobody has asked us for that information.
Sorry?
We have no difficulty in sharing how much that training course cost, but nobody has asked us the question.
Well, I'm asking you now.
Okay.
And tell us how much it costs to put one day, one car to come up from Greencastle to Burtonport, or send somebody down from Kellybegs to Burtonport, even though the county is wrongly divided. Some to Kellybegs, which are near Kellybegs, and the others up to Greencastle. So that's not good management. And you must take responsibility for that, Mr. Hayes.
Okay, so just before we go to the next speaker, just the answer to that question on the cost of the communications advice and training, and if you can give an answer on the cost, as Deputy Gallagher said, of having that Saturday opening in Burtonport.
Thank you, Cahir. Look, Deputy, in relation to the question on the communications training, the total cost was €3,849. And there were eight of us that attended that training. In relation to the resource costs, and I suppose the cost of mileage in relation to the specific matter of Burtonport, I don't have those figures to hand, but I can certainly provide those figures to you separately, Deputy, and I would be happy to do so. Yeah.
If I never got them, all I want is a fair playing pitch to include Burtonport for Saturdays.
Senator O'Reilly.
Thanks for coming in today, and I'm sorry for being late in. I suppose most of the questions I had to ask are actually answered, because I sent in quite a detailed amount of questions before you were coming in, so that you'd be prepared and have those answers, so I thank you for that. I suppose the main thing really why we would like to get you before us is because of the concerns we have about the enforcement, and if it's proportionate and consistent across all the different cases. And I just want to ask, are you confident that that is happening in your organisation?
Thank you, Senator.
Your enforcement approach is consistent.
Senator, I'll take that question. So we're very much guided and directed by the regulations. Okay, so in terms of fisheries control, the EU regulations require that sanctions are applied where non-compliance is detected. Under the national legislation, there is under the 2006 Act for fisheries control, the enforcement option, the only enforcement option, is to submit a file to the DPP for prosecution, for the DPP to consider whether or not to take a prosecution. Points may be applied if it's a serious infringement of the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy. So in terms of the consistency, I think, is what you're referring to. I suppose that is the standard that we have to operate on. I suppose, in training and in guidance to officers, we do provide that guidance on the appropriate enforcement options to take, including in food safety. So I mentioned earlier how there are multiple enforcement options available under the food safety legislative enforcement remit. So fixed payment notices, compliance notices. Those are options which are available under food safety law, which are not available to us under the fisheries control side of the operations of the SFPA. So consistency on the food safety enforcement side is very clearly set out. It's supported by virtue of those options, and we have provided guidance on when those options should be applied. So that does allow for consistency in terms of the enforcement steps which are taken. In terms of the points process, there is very clear, explicit criteria about the types of scenarios which constitute a serious infringement. So there are approximately 32 categories of infringement, and they're prescribed in EU legislation, and where the criteria are present following a detected infringement, the points must be applied. And in Ireland, we submit the file to an independent determination panel, which is made up of 3 legal practitioners, and they make a decision on whether or not the infringement has occurred. So I suppose that the consistency is really embedded in the regulations.
And the interpretation, would you agree? the interpretation of the criteria and the regulations as well. Does that have an impact?
So under the criteria for the serious infringements, for example, I mean, it's very explicit, so there's not much room there for interpretation. For example, it may be that is the misrecording 100% of the margin of tolerance. So that's quite a clear factor. So there wouldn't be a huge degree of interpretation there. But prior to 2026, there was a degree of interpretation under the previous points system because I suppose the file was submitted for a points case to the determination panel on the basis of whether or not the officer believed the infringement was serious by virtue of factors such as the extent of the infringement, the damage done. But the control there was the panel's. The panel would make a decision whether or not it was a serious infringement. So a case could be put forward, but the panel might reject the proposition of the SFPA and say, no, we don't consider this to be a serious infringement. And the panel has done that on numerous occasions. So there are controls there to ensure consistency. And then in terms of the files which go to the courts, I suppose really the consistency lies with the DPP there, because the DPP makes a decision on the cases which are directed on for prosecution.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's really where that's the control there on the files which find their way to the courts.
And the controls within the organisation, within the structure of the organisation, we say there was something happening that was maybe seen to be improper or something within the organisation itself. Is the oversight and accountability within your own organisation structure? Are you happy with it?
So there's multiple checks and balances within the organisation. So a file is submitted to a central unit, and I suppose the benefit of the central unit is that it has oversight of all the activities across the country. So I suppose that's where consistency can come into play. But again, that's only the second step. The third step then will be somebody independent in terms of the DPP, and then in terms of the determination panel for the points. We undertake our own food safety prosecutions if it ever gets to that point. But again, for all types of food safety enforcement actions, it's overseen at a central level to ensure consistency is directed across the country. Yeah.
And I just wasn't getting what Deputy Gallagher was saying. I wasn't sure why he was getting at, but I had a question and I'm not sure if he's already asked it. But did you get media training before your last participation here in the Oireachtas? And did you get media training before this event today?
Thanks, Senator. Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. So in relation to our appearance in November, we did not receive any media training. But we had identified it as a need under our training needs analysis that is conducted, and we did have communications training in advance of this appearance. And you may have heard me confirm that cost to Deputy Gallagher a few minutes ago. So that was €3,849 for that communications training. And I suppose just to add that, I suppose, look, it was in relation to, I suppose, other factors. Obviously, appearances before committees, but in addition to that, crisis communication management. Presenting seminars, etc., and media interviews.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We need to put in context in terms of that whole sorry. My apologies. put some figures there in context of the whole enforcement issue. We'd say, like, every year there's something like around 45,000 landings into Ireland of fishing vessels, And we would, on average, maybe inspect around 3,000 of those landings every year when they come in, And of those landings, like the number of cases that end up going to the DPP are somewhere in the region of 50 or 60 a year. If you look at page 4 of our opening statement today, so like the perception was given on other occasions that there was complete harassment there, But if you look at those figures, the number of cases that end up going to DPP in comparison to the number of landings, it's actually very small in reality.
Neil Margaret. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for being here, for your participation in this meeting. I'd be grateful if some of the questions that were unanswered, if we could get responses to those by the end of the week. And as I said at the top of the meeting, Deputy McLaughlin is drafting a report on behalf of the committee that will look at the whole gamut of sea fisheries protection issues and benchmarking that against what happens in other European member states as well, and indeed non-EU member states with fishing in this part of the world. But I do want to thank the SFPA for being available again today. I don't think this will be the last engagement we have. I think it'll be worthwhile to maintain a standing engagement with this SFPA as part of that accountability piece. But I do thank you for your contributions. And as there are no further matters for discussion today, the meeting of the Joint Committee stands adjourned until the 21st of April at 11 a.m. Grimil Magwith.